Echoes of the Nexus, Episode 6. After a grueling day of training, Zephyr returned to his quarters, his body aching and his mind swirling with new information. He barely had the energy to remove his boots before he collapsed onto the bed, his eyes closing almost instantly. Just as he was about to drift off into a much-needed sleep, a soft melodic sound filled the room. It was a sound he recognized, a sound that had saved him once before. His eyes snapped open, and there, floating right in front of his face, was the small glowing creature. Zephyr let out a yelp of surprise, tumbling off the bed in his haste to put some distance between him and the unexpected visitor. His heart pounded in his chest as he looked at the creature, its soft light casting an ethereal glow in the dimly lit room. "Whoa! You scared me, little guy," Zephyr exclaimed, trying to catch his breath. The creature just floated there, its light pulsing in a rhythm that seemed almost soothing. It was a stark contrast to the adrenaline coursing through Zephyr's veins. Zephyr's eyes widened in recognition. "Wait, you're that little guy from before, with Seraphil," he said, pointing a shaky finger at the creature. The creature bobbed in the air, as if acknowledging Zephyr's words. The commotion had drawn attention. The door to his quarters slid open, and Lumina rushed in, her blue hair flowing behind her. "Zephyr, what's going on?" she asked, her eyes scanning the room before landing on the floating creature. "Oh, it's you, Pippin," she said, her voice softening. She approached the creature, extending a hand towards it. Pippin floated closer, its light pulsing gently. "Pippin," Zephyr echoed, his eyebrows shooting up in surprise. "You know this thing?" Lumina nodded, her eyes still on Pippin. "Yes, Pippin is a glitzy sprout. They're rare creatures, known for their ability to appear and disappear at will. Their abilities are largely unknown, but they're harmless," she explained, her hand gently stroking Pippin, who responded with soft musical chimes. Zephyr watched in awe, his fear slowly replaced by fascination. "A glitzy sprout, huh?" he murmured, looking at Pippin with newfound respect. "Nice to meet you, Pippin." Zephyr watched as Pippin, the glitzy sprout, seemed to be engrossed in its own world. The creature was staring at its tiny feet, its round body bobbing gently in the air. Its face was always adorned with a simple, content smile, as if it was perpetually amused by the world around it. Suddenly, Pippin's head began to tilt upwards, its gaze slowly moving from its feet to meet Zephyr's. The room was silent, the only sound being the soft hum of the confluence around them. And then, as its eyes met Zephyr's, Pippin emitted a soft, melodic chime. Almost simultaneously, a faint, comical sound echoed in the room, as if Pippin had just passed gas. Zephyr blinked, taken aback, and then burst into laughter. The tension in the room dissipated, replaced by a sense of light-heartedness. Lumina, standing by the door, chuckled, shaking her head at the glitzy sprout's antics. "Pippin," Zephyr said, still chuckling, "you're one odd creature." The glitzy sprout simply bobbed in the air, its smile never wavering. It chimed again, the sound resonating in the room like a soft musical note. It was as if Pippin was laughing along with them, its own unique way of expressing joy. Just as Zephyr was about to say something else, a rank smell filled the room. Zephyr's laughter died in his throat as he covered his nose, his eyes watering. Lumina groaned, doing the same. "Pippin!" she exclaimed, her voice muffled behind her hand. The glitzy sprout simply bobbed in the air, its smile never wavering. It chimed again, the sound now seeming more like a cheeky giggle. In that moment, despite the smell, Zephyr felt a sense of camaraderie with this strange yet endearing creature. The fear and uncertainty of the upcoming game seemed a little less daunting. With the smell finally dissipating, Lumina opened a window, letting in a rush of fresh air. The confluence was always alive even at this late hour, and the distant sounds of the city filled the room. Pippin, seemingly oblivious to the chaos it had caused, floated over to the window, its eyes wide with curiosity as it watched the city below. Lumina turned to Zephyr, her expression serious once again. "We should get some rest, Zephyr. The games start early tomorrow and we need to be prepared." Zephyr nodded, his laughter fading as the reality of the situation set in. He was about to participate in a deadly competition in a world he barely understood. The fear was creeping back in, but he pushed it down. He had to be strong, not just for himself, but for Pippin, Lumina, and everyone else who was counting on him. With a final glance at Pippin, who was now happily bobbing by the window, Zephyr climbed into bed. The sheets were cool and comforting, and despite the whirlwind of thoughts in his head, he found himself drifting off to sleep. As he closed his eyes, he could hear the distant chime of Pippin, a soft, comforting sound that reminded him he wasn't alone. With that thought, Zephyr let himself fall into a deep, restful sleep, ready to face the challenges of the new day. Tomorrow, the games would begin, and Zephyr would be ready. The night passed in a blur for Zephyr. Between the revelation of his Vitalis, the introduction to Pippin, and the looming threat of the games, sleep was a fleeting luxury. He tossed and turned on his bed, his mind filled with a whirlwind of thoughts and fears. As dawn broke, Zephyr found himself staring at the ceiling of his quarters, the soft hum of the confluence a comforting background noise. He turned his head, his eyes landing on Pippin, who was perched on a nearby table, its glasses reflecting the early morning light. "Today's the day, huh?" Zephyr muttered, pushing himself up from the bed. He felt a strange sense of calm wash over him. Fear still lingered, but it was overshadowed by a newfound determination. He was a contender in the games, and he would face whatever came his way. Pippin made a soft chime sound, its body glowing a gentle blue. It was as if the glitzy sprout was offering its own form of encouragement. Zephyr couldn't help but smile at the creature. Despite its oddities, Pippin had quickly become a comforting presence. Zephyr stepped out of his room, following the enticing aroma that wafted through the air. He found Lumina in a small kitchen area, busily preparing what appeared to be breakfast. The sight that greeted him was both fascinating and slightly unnerving. The table was set with an array of dishes that were unlike anything Zephyr had ever seen. There were fruits that shimmered with an iridescent sheen, their colors shifting and changing like a soap bubble. There were pastries that floated a few inches above the plates, gently bobbing up and down. A pot bubbled with a stew that seemed to glow with a soft, warm light. Lumina turned to him, a smile on her face. "Ah, you're awake. Good. Breakfast is served," she said, gesturing towards the table. "I hope you're hungry." Zephyr approached the table, his curiosity piqued. He reached out to touch one of the floating pastries, half expecting his hand to pass right through it, but it was solid and surprisingly warm to the touch. He took a bite, and his eyes widened in surprise. It was delicious, the flavors rich and complex, unlike anything he had tasted before. As he sat down to eat, he couldn't help but marvel at the strange, alien world he had found himself in, and yet, despite the oddities and the dangers, he felt a strange sense of excitement. He was about to compete in the games, to tap into powers he never knew he had, and to explore a world beyond his wildest dreams. Just as Zephyr was about to take another bite of the floating pastry, a soft chime echoed through the room. He turned to see Pippin standing at the entrance of the kitchen, its eyes wide and curious. The glitzy sprout waddled over to the table, its tiny feet making soft pattering sounds on the floor. Pippin's eyes were drawn to the floating pastries. It reached out a hand, poking one of the pastries. The pastry bobbed under the touch, floating away from Pippin. The glitzy sprout made a surprised chime sound, its eyes following the pastry as it floated away. Then, with a determined look on its face, Pippin leapt into the air, trying to catch the floating pastry. But the pastry bobbed out of reach, causing Pippin to land back on the floor with a soft thud. Undeterred, Pippin tried again and again, its attempts to catch the elusive pastry turning into a comical dance. Zephyr couldn't help but laugh at the sight, the tension from the upcoming games momentarily forgotten. Even Lumina, who had been watching the scene with an amused smile, let out a soft chuckle. With breakfast finished, Zephyr leaned back in his chair, feeling a little more at ease. The food, while strange, had been surprisingly good, and he felt a renewed sense of energy coursing through him. Pippin, having finished its own meal, was now floating around the room, its light casting playful shadows on the walls. Lumina was clearing the dishes, her movements graceful and efficient. "We have a big day ahead of us, Zephyr," she said, her voice serious. "The games will start soon, and we need to be prepared." Zephyr nodded, his mind already racing with thoughts of the upcoming competition. He felt a mixture of fear and excitement, the reality of his situation sinking in. "All right," he said, standing up from the table. "Let's get to work." "All right, Zephyr," Lumina said, her voice serious. It's time. Zephyr looked at her, his heart pounding in his chest. The games, he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Lumina nodded, her eyes meeting his. The games, she confirmed. Remember what we've discussed. Stay focused, stay in control, use your Vitalis wisely. Zephyr nodded, taking a deep breath. He felt a surge of adrenaline, a mix of fear and excitement. He was about to step into the unknown to face challenges he could barely imagine, but he wasn't alone. He had Lumina, he had Pippin, and he had his Vitalis. With a final nod to Lumina, Zephyr stepped forward, following her as they made their way to the games. As they walked, he could feel the energy in the air, the anticipation. He could hear the distant roar of the crowd, the cheers and jeers of the spectators. As they approached the entrance to the arena, Zephyr took one last look at Lumina. She gave him a reassuring smile, her eyes filled with confidence. "You're ready, Zephyr," she said. "You can do this." As Zephyr and Lumina neared the staging area for the contenders, he couldn't help but gawk at the sight before him. There were about 100 beings, each one more bizarre and intimidating than the last. They were all contenders like him, each representing a different species from across the universe. To his left, a towering creature with scales that shimmered like polished metal flexed its massive clawed hands. Its eyes, glowing with an eerie green light, scanned the crowd with an air of indifference. To his right, a group of smaller insect-like beings chattered amongst themselves, their many legs clicking against the ground in a rhythmic pattern. Their exoskeletons were a vibrant blue, and they moved with a swift, coordinated grace that was almost hypnotic. Further ahead, a being made entirely of what looked like swirling liquid light hovered above the ground. It pulsed with a soft, ethereal glow, its form constantly shifting and changing. It was beautiful, in a strange, otherworldly way. And those were just a few. There were beings of all shapes and sizes, some with multiple limbs, some with none, some covered in fur, others in feathers or scales or skin that seemed to ripple and change color with their mood. Each one was a testament to the incredible diversity of life in the universe. Zephyr felt a lump in his throat. These were his competitors, the beings he would be facing in the games. Zephyr looked at Lumina, a question burning in his mind. "Are all these beings here on their own free will?" he asked, his gaze sweeping over the crowd of contenders. Lumina sighed, her eyes reflecting a deep sadness. "Very few," she admitted. "There's always the crazy ones who are seeking to get Vitalis, but most are forced to fight, either by command of the Council or as prisoners from other star systems." Her words hung heavy in the air, a stark reminder of the grim reality they were facing. The games were not a spectacle of entertainment, but a brutal fight for survival, and for many there was no choice but to participate. Zephyr felt a pang of sympathy for his fellow contenders. Like him, they were caught in a situation beyond their control, fighting for their lives in a game they didn't choose to play. He clenched his fists, his resolve hardening. He would survive the games, not just for himself but for all those who were forced to fight against their will. Zephyr turned to see a tall, muscular figure approaching him. The being had a humanoid form, but his skin was a vibrant shade of blue, and his eyes glowed with an intense, fiery orange. He had a friendly smile on his face, which somewhat eased Zephyr's nerves. "Hello there, human," the figure said, his voice deep and resonating. "I'm Quilthos. I heard you're the first of your kind to participate in the games. Quite fascinating, I must say." Zephyr swallowed, feeling a bit intimidated by Quilthos's towering height. Yeah, I'm Zephyr. Nice to meet you, Quilthos." Quilthos extended a hand, and Zephyr shook it, feeling the firm grip of the alien. "May the best being win, Zephyr," Quilthos said, his eyes gleaming with a competitive spirit. "And remember, it's not just about strength. It's about wit, strategy, and the will to survive." Zephyr nodded, taking in Quilthos's words. He had a feeling that the games were going to be much more challenging than he had initially thought. A hush fell over the crowd as a figure stepped onto a raised platform at the front of the gathering. The figure was tall and imposing, with a stern expression etched onto their face. They wore a uniform of some sort, adorned with various insignias and symbols that Zephyr didn't recognize. Their skin was a deep, rich purple, and their eyes glowed a bright, piercing white. "Attention, contenders," the figure began, their voice echoing throughout the space. "Welcome to the games. I am Commander Voss, your overseer for this event. Zephyr felt a chill run down his spine at the mention of the word overseer. He glanced at Lumina, who was watching the commander with a serious expression. Commander Voss stepped forward, their gaze sweeping over the crowd of contenders. "Welcome to the games," they began, their voice echoing throughout the space. "There are no rules here, only survival. You will face a series of 5 games, each one more challenging than the last." A murmur rippled through the crowd, eyes widening, breaths hitching. Each contender who perishes will contribute their remaining vitalis to the pool for the survivors. It is possible for all contenders to survive, so there can be more than one winner. A large screen flickered to life behind Voss, displaying a rapidly changing number. The contenders watched in awe as the numbers rolled like a slot machine, before finally settling on a staggering figure: 12,700,000 vitalis. "The grand prize," Voss announced, gesturing to the screen, "plus 10% of the betting pool." Beside the grand prize, another leaderboard flickered into existence, listing each contender's name alongside their current betting value. The top contender, a hulking figure known as Chubumbus the Powerful, had a staggering betting pot of 19,007,060 V. His reputation was well known, and it seemed the crowd was heavily in his favor. Zephyr's name was second to last, with a betting value of just 2,300 V. He couldn't help but feel a pang of disappointment. He was an unknown in this world, a human among aliens, and it seemed the crowd had little faith in his chances. The last place was occupied by a small insect-like creature named Shrats, its betting value a mere 1,700 V. Zephyr couldn't help but feel a pang of sympathy for the creature. They were both underdogs in this competition, their chances of survival slim. Zephyr stared at the screen, his name glaring back at him from near the bottom of the list. He let out a dry laugh. "Well, at least I'm worth more than a cup of coffee on Earth," he quipped, trying to lighten the mood. Lumina gave him a small smile. "Look on the bright side, Zephyr. At least you're not last." Zephyr glanced at the small, insect-like creature at the bottom of the list, its betting value even lower than his. "Yeah," he said, his voice flat. "Lucky me." Zephyr's heart pounded in his chest as he was led to a small cylindrical pod. It looked like an elevator, but there were no buttons, no controls, just a dim light illuminating the stark interior. "Contenders, enter your pods," Voss's voice echoed through the arena. The crowd fell silent, the tension palpable. Zephyr hesitated at the entrance of his pod, glancing back at Lumina and Pippin. Lumina gave him a nod of encouragement, her blue hair shimmering in the light. Pippin, in his usual manner, was staring off into the distance, seemingly oblivious to the gravity of the situation. Taking a deep breath, Zephyr stepped into the pod. The moment his foot crossed the threshold, the doors slammed shut behind him, plunging him into semi-darkness. His heart pounded in his ears, the reality of the situation sinking in. The games were about to begin. Hey there, fellow star travelers. If you've been captivated by this cosmic journey, crafted by the power of AI, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe to our channel for more interstellar adventures. But wait, there's more. You, yes, you, have the power to shape the course of our story. Drop a comment below on how you think our saga should unfold. Should we encounter alien civilizations, uncover ancient cosmic mysteries, or maybe take a detour through a wormhole? The universe is your playground. Our AI will analyze your suggestions, seeking out the most intriguing twists and turns for our tale. And remember, comments with the most likes have a higher chance of steering our story, so make your ideas shine. So don't forget to like, subscribe, and leave your comment to join us on this incredible journey. Together, we'll chart a course through the stars, one comment at a time. Until our next journey, stay curious and keep exploring.